Amazon holiday season is your chance to boost your sales like never before. In this video, we will reveal 3 strategies to ultimately improve conversions for the holiday season and beyond. You will also learn how successful Amazon brands are preparing for the busiest time of the year to maximize the sales. Watch this video to learn more.
Hi there, I'm really happy to have you here today to join me on Orange Click channel to talk about how Amazon sellers can get more growth opportunities from the Q4, which is known as the holiday season. So before we go to today's topic, could you first introduce yourself and also let us know what Quartile does and how do you help Amazon sellers?
Sure thing. My name is Kanan Schledelzink. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer over here at Quartile, and we're a software platform for advertising optimization and bid management for all e-commerce marketplaces and channels. So we work with about 5,000 brands globally on directing and optimizing their ad spend across Amazon, Walmart, Instacart, various open web channels for their direct-to-consumer sites. We're kind of the platform of record for e-commerce advertising.
Sounds really good. And because you have a lot of experience working with Amazon sellers and different brands, you're here today to share a couple of insights about how Amazon sellers can have a very strong Q4. So you have prepared some slides for us as well. So go ahead, share your screen, and let's go to your presentation.
All right. So what we thought we'd do this session, we've done a few different videos and content pieces with the Orange Click team around innovation and how to look at tech and advertising optimization platforms. What we wanted to do here was open up some content that we actually create internally for our existing customer base around growth opportunities for the holiday season. And this is something that we develop every year, and we start talking to our customers about over the course of Q3 and then in early Q4 around where you can leverage kind of what you're doing currently across marketplaces and advertising channels to improve and iterate on your results in the holiday season, and also grow and expand into other areas. So we'll get into it. So a little bit about Quartile. I know we kind of gave a preamble before, but if you're not aware, so we are the largest independent e-commerce advertising platform in the world, and we are independent of any other ad network, media platform, or marketplace. We plug into marketplace and media partners via API, and our software manages your advertising spend holistically across those channels, balances budgets according to where you're seeing results and need to see results, and overall helps you get as much return on your advertising spend as possible. So just, a few quick creds. We work with about 5,000 brands globally, and that covers about $2 billion in ad spend under management annually. So it's quite a lot of data. It's quite a lot of spend under management. It's quite a lot of sales for our customers. So to give you a snapshot of kind of the types of customers we work with, it really runs the gamut, right? So we work with large kind of familiar global brands like Unilever and Clorox and others, down to, kind of mid-sized regional direct-to-consumer brands, as well as really thousands of third-party sellers. So that's all to say that we don't specialize necessarily in any specific vertical or category. Everything we do is math-based, data-based. We're leveraging machine learning to optimize ads. So it's not that, we know CPG really, really well, or we know specifically third-party seller environment really well. We know the data really well, and that works across every type of advertising and vertical, regardless of your size or type. So let's get into it. I think it's pretty obvious to everyone here that the last 2.5 years have been somewhat of a wild ride. We've seen, at least, strictly economically speaking, some really, really good things in e-commerce growth. And then, of course, that's come with a lot of unique and interesting challenges that we haven't seen in the category before. And so kind of where we are now, if you see here, is that we've really normalized according to what that growth trend would have looked like without the pandemic, right? So we had that big spike at the end of 2020 and early 2021, and then that's kind of normalized into what we would have expected from the general trend line. And we've had all kinds of challenges, from supply chain to inflation and things like that we're still dealing with today. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about how some of the top brands and sellers that we work with are adapting their strategies and their tactics in these scenarios overall, and then how specifically you can leverage some of those things as we head into the busy season of the year. So I want to talk about 3 overarching areas here, right? So one is, of course, segmenting audiences 2, it'll be exploring kind of new channels and new opportunities within those channels. And 3 is improving conversions, right? So iterating, doing the tactics and strategies that are going to offer you that incremental improvement on your advertising investment. So let's get into the audience piece. So this is generally how we kind of think about audiences, or I should say, targeting when it comes to advertising and e-commerce, right? So there's these two categories, right? Passive targeting and active targeting. So passive targeting is what we consider kind of like the bottom of the funnel. What really is the core and foundation of most e-commerce advertising businesses: search, right? That's where it starts. That's typically where most sales end, right? And you're never going to run a healthy advertising investment without having search stable and core to everything you do. And then we can talk about active targeting, right? Which is where we go kind of beyond that last mile, so to speak, in the consumer purchase journey. And we start to think about audiences and cohorts and starting to reach people in earlier phases of the purchase journey, when we get into intent, awareness, and discovery. And finding those users and bringing them down into the funnel where they might start searching and start converting. And this is really how, once you've kind of maxed out or plateaued, so to speak, with your passive targeting strategies, going into active targeting is an incredible way to get incremental growth. So let's talk about what that looks like, right? So we kind of lump that in then to 3 core categories here, right? We've got in-market shoppers, your competitor shoppers, and your brand's current customers and shoppers, right? And so there's a lot of different strategies that you can execute while thinking about these 3 different groups, how they overlap and how they don't, right? So if you're thinking about existing customers and how to leverage that audience data, we're talking about, increasing the volume of repeat purchases and purchasers, loyalty programs, and subscribe and save type strategies. We're looking at in-market shoppers, so new to brand, so to speak, how we attract net new customers, how we re-engage with in-market shoppers who maybe looked or searched but didn't convert. And then, of course, from a competitive standpoint, how do we look at shoppers who are considering your competitors, searching for your competitors, or even are existing customers of your competitors, and how do we attract those into your purchase funnel and convert them to your customers? So let's talk about a little bit about how we drill down on some of these individual strategies and how we think brands should be thinking about them. So let's think about re-engaging with in-market shoppers. So what does that mean, right? So if you look at the data, and anybody, especially my third-party sellers in the house and the folks that are kind of living in the Amazon consoles on a daily basis, right, that 80 to 95% clicks don't translate into sales, but those are still active users, that are active shoppers. So in those scenarios, either that customer didn't convert with one of your products and maybe bought a competitor's product, or they're still in the consideration set, right? They're still, maybe it's the type of product, and we'll talk about these, kind of this insight and data that we can build around these things. But a bigger, a higher purchase point might have a longer consideration timeline, things like that. So they might still be out there shopping, but not necessarily, but still haven't converted there. And so we were able to kind of look at these customers who are still in market, target them with display or video ads on and off platform, right? So regardless if this is someone shopping on Amazon or Walmart or any other marketplace, we can target them on the open web to get them back into the purchase funnel and get them to convert where they might not have earlier. And let's talk about upsell and cross-sell. So this is a tactic, that it is very basic but very effective for your existing customers, right? So, this is an example. As you can probably see by looking at me, I'm really into ballet. So this is an example of, like a ballet brand. This is actually one of our customers, and so, they sell. A customer might convert on one item here, like this leotard, and that's an opportunity then to actually target them for that same customer or same kind of audience cohort for items that are typically bought with that, right? So short sleeve version, the shoe that goes with it, the tights, the skirt, everything that kind of is complementary to that, or you see in your own data that is purchased together in some way, shape, or form. You don't have to just target them in the product page itself, but this is an opportunity then to go and target that audience. That they converted on one piece of it, they're highly likely to convert for other items, target them off site, bring them back into the funnel, and get that incremental spend back into. And so then let's also talk about attracting new customers. So this is a way to, particularly for competitive conquesting, looking at customers who are searching for competitive brands or generally are shopping in the category, and targeting them with display ads outside of search, right? So that this can be done within Marketplace or again, outside of Marketplace on the open web. You know that there's intent. You know that these people are in market and shopping, whether it's for your competitor or not, and you're able to, this is a good way to kind of bring them back in the funnel, particularly in the the busiest time of the year, the heaviest shopping time of the year. Consumers are, they're leaning in, they're spending a lot of time shopping, but there's also a lot of competition from an advertising perspective, and frankly, a lot of kind of competition for mind share for consumers in general, right? Like they're thinking about the holiday needs. They're busy with their own Q4 work. So, it's really important to be able to hit consumers with messages that will stand out, and they're not necessarily always competing with 3 or 4 or 40 different ads in whatever environment that they're looking in. And then let's talk about loyalty. So this is, this is obviously not for every type of product or type of brand, but if you're selling products that are frequent purchases, whether that frequency is once a week or once a month or once a quarter, it's critical to set up loyalty programs and convert these guys. On Amazon, it's Subscribe and Save. Walmart and other marketplaces have similar offerings, but this is really, really critical to be engaged in these programs, because obviously then that converts into recurring revenue. These customers also have a higher lifetime value outside of just what they're purchasing in the Subscribe and Save program. So if a customer, and this is obviously a detergent brand example, but customers who are likely to sign up for specific, Subscribe and Save for just this detergent are also likely to purchase more on an incremental basis for differing products within that complementary product set. And then lastly, as you look at these kind of tactics, it's also really critical to understand your customer's behavior, right? Especially in relation to the individual products that you sell, right? So that's just something to think about as well. And this is, something we always walk our customers through is, when you think about your product set, which of those items are prone to repeat purchases, right? You can see this data through the Amazon Audience Insights tool. Other platforms have similar programs, and we aggregate that data also internally to help our customers with across omni-channel campaigns. But, for instance, with the coffee brand, the number of purchases or repeat purchases is very high, right? This is something that folks need to refill on a regular basis. So you want to be looking at that, particularly relative to your competitive set. So for example, here we see one where this is really, really healthy, right? Because this brand, which is the darker blue here, has a much higher number of repeat purchases than brands similar to it in the space. So that means loyalty program is running really strong. It's really healthy. If you see this, kind of if you see the inverse of that, that means that you need to devote a little extra attention and investment into some of these loyalty programs if you see that you're lagging behind similar brands. The other thing too is consideration period, right? So we talked a little bit about this earlier. Being aware of how long consumers are generally in market looking for your type of product or your type of brand, and how long it takes them to make a decision and ultimately convert, because this should impact how you're targeting audiences and the frequency through which you're targeting audiences, right? So, if you have 8 to 14 day purchase window, that means you need to be pretty aggressive in terms of your frequency within a narrow, kind of 2-week stretch to make sure that you're top of mind for that consumer and that you're moving them down the purchase funnel. If that, for higher purchase point items, this one here is a Power Tools brand where people might do a little bit more research. There might be, certainly comparison shopping a little bit more. You need to understand that, okay, this is a longer window and we want to open up the targeting period to a 30 or 60 day stretch. And then you're not going to hit them with as many ads, but you want to critically time those across that purchase journey. And the other thing is this is also where you start to think about how important content, reviews, things like that are around your product set, right? Because the longer the purchase period, the more critical it is to have a good review base, to have really clear and concise content about the unique selling propositions of your products, the value there, and make sure that those things are optimized as well outside of just the core advertising tactics. So let's talk a little bit about exploring new channels. So the big one this year, especially for in terms of marketplace spend, has been Walmart, right? And this is where we see, particularly the holiday season for consumers in North America, probably the biggest single incremental growth opportunity. So you see, and I'm sure if you're familiar with the space and reading the trends and everything like that, the biggest, probably the most important number here is this 12% sales growth year over year. So as we see some of the other major marketplaces like Amazon, but then even internationally like Flipkart, Mercado Libre, and things like that, GMV is starting to slow down in certain areas, right? Just because particularly with Amazon, it's not necessarily a bad thing; it's just maxed out. Right. Walmart is an area that is still growing. It's still emerging. That means that there's a lot of incremental sales to be had there, and there's less competition from an advertising perspective. So those sales come at a lower cost per acquisition. The investment can be smaller for an outsized return, right? And so what we're seeing in Walmart on average is, brands that take kind of 15% of their advertising investment and move that into Walmart can see about a 30% increase in ad sales overall. So it's kind of a no-brainer, particularly if you're selling in those North American markets, to start to engage on Walmart, start to launch those programs, and start to deliver to those consumers who are just now starting their holiday shopping for 2022. This is just a case study for one of our big brands, and this is actually a reseller, right? So not a brand or even a third-party seller. So this is, if you know the reseller space, you know that it's one of the most competitive and difficult areas to succeed in. And so they launched on Walmart earlier this year, and it's had a hugely positive effect for them, right? So an 85% year-over-year increase in GMV. It's boosted traffic to their direct-to-consumer site by almost 50% and a 12% lift in conversion rate. So the value is there. It's certainly, the top line scale in a Walmart is still not where Amazon is, but it's a great way to find incremental value and incremental sales going into Q4 for your business. So let's talk about improving conversion, right? The age-old and most important thing to always be doing, right, is iterating on what you're doing and improving your results, right? And so I think the first thing that we always talk about is really looking at all of your advertising channels holistically, and making sure that you're not just optimizing in silos, but really understanding, okay, well, what are my sales as a result of each individual advertising channel? How are my budgets kind of dedicated across those channels, and how do I use learnings and insights from one channel to apply to another, right? And so this is a little bit of a self-serving slide here. Obviously, this is core to what we do, right? Is to not only look and look at where performance is and make budget recommendations and make sure that we're investing in the right places, but also look at the data that's available to us in each channel, because it's all unique, right? And so there's ways to understand how consumers are buying products on one channel and apply those learnings to other channels. Even just little things like, hourly bidding and hourly conversion data being available on Amazon in the US, but not in other markets on Amazon or in some other marketplaces like Walmart. But being able to look at that data and understand that consumer behavior in other markets might be similar in terms of day part conversions. Certainly in other marketplaces, it's going to be similar within the same geographic area, and applying those learnings and those bid adjustments to those channels. So examples like that are why it's really critical to be able to look at optimization holistically within one platform across all of your investment channels. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier, and this is one thing that I think sometimes when we kind of go get really deep in the weeds on bid management and optimization, and all the kind of algorithmic approaches here, that product listings and creative is really important, right? And so we always want to do a health check, especially heading into the season, to make sure that everything is really clean across your direct-to-consumer side, across all your marketplace storefronts, for your product listings, starting with imagery and video, reviews, product descriptions, etc. We want to make sure that those things are are clean, easy to understand, and are resonating with clients. And so, here's an example of why this is really, really critical. So this is a brand we work with. It's kind of like an outdoorsy home goods brand, and this is their top selling item, which is this emergency fire starting kit for camping and hiking. And so this was previously the product image here, and it looks, it's a nice little image, but it looks like kind of like a backpack, right? But really, when we looked into all of the reviews, particularly reviews for repeat purchasers, high converting customers who buy multiple items, things like that. The critical piece here was that, obviously the fire starting kit, right, and all the materials that came with it. And so this had been kind of buried in different images there. We bring this one to the front. That's the headline. People immediately understand it, see what it is. It helps it stand out a little bit more in the competitive set. And that really resulted in a 28% increase in conversion rate. So this is just a small example here, but still really, really critical that you're not forgetting kind of about the content and creative aspects, so to speak, of your listings as you go into the busy season, because a lot of times, when you're competing with 4 other sponsored products or 10 other sponsored products on that same top of search page, it's the actual product that needs to stand out, not just the advertising behind it. And so that needs to be as good as it can be. And so let's kind of talk about, some timelines here. Obviously, we're in Q4. There was a Prime Day last week. I know that maybe not as great of a Prime Day as as it has been in years past, but we're dealing with 2 of them a year now. So I think it's a little bit overload for most consumers. But we have Black Friday coming up, Cyber Monday, and then right into the meat of the holiday shopping season. And then, of course, one thing that's important as well for, not for every brand, but for a lot of brands and types of products, we've got the New Year shopping. So New Year, New Me, health and wellness, supplements, things like that. This is really that time to shine heading into early December. And so a lot of the things we talked about today, these are all things that can be, planned for and implemented in a matter of days. So it's not too late. Now's actually the time to strike and get organized around it. And whether, you've kind of listened to these things and said, hey, I need to do all this, or just, hey, I've got two out of those three things covered, but it's time to act on this other one. Now's the perfect time to do it. So good luck to everybody in Q4 and then beyond into 2023. And if you'd like to discuss with us how we might be able to help you, feel free to reach out at sales@quartile.com, or you can email me directly at Canaan, CANAAN @quartile.com, and we'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing out, I think, very important fundamental things, as you said, that could be implemented throughout of the year. So my first question is actually about one of the last parts of your presentation. So you said it's always good to test different visuals and test different elements regarding of the product listing page. So I wanted to ask, what are some of your favorite ways to test those things? Are you running experiments on Amazon platform itself, or do you use any other tools to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do it. I think what we typically look at is basic A/B testing on Amazon. On the product pages themselves. There's some other things that we can do around actually kind of copy and product image testing in the ads themselves with the Amazon DSP, and that's actually kind of a great way to do it very, very fast, because you can get all sorts of data in terms of view through, click through, etc., on a lot of different creative elements within the banner ad or video that you're running. Amazon has a lot of really interesting tools in the DSP to do that. Both, kind of creative A/B testing, but then also testing for incrementality over, baseline, like consumers who didn't see an ad at all. And so we do a lot of those things that way. And then also we just look at we do kind of a language-based analysis in our platform of product descriptions and reviews, which also tell us, kind of what, when we see the certain words and phrases come up in reviews and review content, what consumers are looking for and what really stands out about that specific product. And we want to make sure that that's called out in the product description.
Okay, great answer. So is Amazon DSP something Amazon sellers have to use in order to do that off Amazon advertising, in order to re-engage with those in-market shoppers that you talked about earlier in your presentation?
Yeah, so that's currently the only way to leverage that audience data with Amazon. You don't specifically as a brand necessarily need to have an Amazon DSP account yourself. our existing customers can work through our account, and we can handle all that for them. And a lot of other, there's lots of other services, agencies, and things like that that can offer that as well. So you don't need to have to, kind of necessarily make that investment to open up an Amazon DSP seat yourself as a brand or seller, but that is the only way to get the audience data.
Okay, very good. And generally speaking, I know you do work together with a lot of brands, but you also attend different events for Amazon sellers. So what are Amazon sellers currently thinking about this year's Q4, let's say compared to last year, for example? What are their thoughts? How's the overall situation on the e-commerce platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's, I'd say cautiously optimistic is probably the best way to describe it. I mean, I think, there's certainly concerns around inflation, and, some economic uncertainties around that. But I think also there's, I would say there are certainly positive trends around, sales actually through the summer, and while the Prime Day last week wasn't like an explosive kind of event, what it does, I think, psychologically almost for consumers is it kicks off the holiday shopping season a month early, right? Which then what that means is that consumers have, they're kind of in that holiday shopping mode, instead of beginning it like, with the Black Friday and Cyber 5 event about, actually a month and a half almost before that. And then what that means as well is, not only is it a heavier shopping period for everyone, but consumers have more time to, it sounds cynical almost, but more time to spend money, right? So you're talking about, 2 or 3 more payroll actions that are going to happen for the average consumer than they would in years past with a more narrow shopping window. So that means that, while we're struggling with the inflation numbers, if the buying period is spread out over more time, that by nature means that consumers have more time or more money to spend, so to speak. So, I'd say cautiously optimistic. I think everybody's aware of the headwinds in the space right now, not just for e-commerce, but commerce in general, right? But I think that there's still a good story to be told for a lot of brands and sellers who are doing the right things with their product set, with their brands in general, and how they're structuring investment across the channels they're in and expanding into the ones where their consumers are shopping. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming here today to share your knowledge. And before we go, could you once more explain how Quartile helps Amazon sellers and what kind of brands do you usually work together with?
Yeah, so we help sellers with their advertising optimization and management. We're a software platform that leverages machine learning and API connections into the marketplaces to make these optimizations, based on the data that we see. And we have a world-class service team to help kind of be that hands-on keyboard layer to help execute. And as far as the types of brands and sellers we work with, we work with quite literally thousands of third-party sellers that are small brands, doing around $1 million in sales a year to, the biggest CPG companies in the world, like the Unilevers and Cloroxes. So for us, again, it's not a specific vertical or type of brand or seller that we excel at necessarily. I'd say that if you've got a good product that people are interested in buying, then our tools can help you scale that and make your investment in advertising as efficient as possible.
Sounds great. So thanks again for joining, and we wish all of the brands you work together with have a very strong end of the year.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I hope you got some useful tips to make the best out of this holiday season. As always, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to leave a comment below in the comment section. And if you like the content we create, don't forget to like and subscribe. And now I would like to recommend you to watch other video which will help you to prepare for Q4, if not this, then next year, where Chris Rawlings gives us a step-by-step walkthrough what to pay attention to during Q4 seasons and how to prepare for it?